Welcome to Dharma Podcast. Thank you for joining us again. We are here to discuss the gut wrenching suicide of Atul Subash. And while it has been reported extensively in the media, this horrific incident is like no other suicide. And it has certain cultural and civilizational dimensions for which I think the best person to have a conversation with is Sandeep Balakrishna. There will be a different lens in the course of the conversation, is what I anticipate. So, thank you all for joining us, and let's get started with Sandeep Balakrishna. Hi, Sandeep.
Hi, Parag.
As horrific and gut wrenching as the suicide of Atul Subash has been, I think it merits a discussion on are there any other aspects apart from what has been reported in the media in terms of our culture and civilizational, which perhaps can add an added dimension to this horrific episode. So this suicide, like no other so far that has been reported, it was a 24-page suicide note, a 80-minute video, which explained in detail the step-by-step harassment that he had to suffer at the hands of his wife and her family. And he had a note pasted on his chest, justice needs to be done. I mean, that really makes this very gut-wrenching and different from any other suicides that have been reported in the media so far in years. So, as ugly as it is, like I keep saying, it merits a discussion so that lessons are learned, people understand larger perspectives, and hopefully, no one ever goes through this again. So, thank you for joining, Sandeep. And if you could shed some light on how do you see this apart from whatever has been reported in the media?
Yeah, Parag, thanks for framing this rather tragic and at many levels extremely cruel episode involving the suicide of the late lamented Atul Subash. I mean, there have been discussions almost immediately as soon as this incident went viral, and both in mainstream media and newspapers, columns, and of course the plethora of YouTube channels, they're all giving it the coverage in the manner it deserves. The coverage, especially on YouTube channels, has been rather appreciable. It puts the facts in perspective, and generally the tone and the tenor of all these perspectives on YouTube videos about this issue is that there is a keen sense of injustice being done to Atul by using our legal system. So I'm no lawyer, but going by it is very extremely hard to watch 80 minutes of excruciating agony. And the calm clinical manner in which he laid out the details of the kind of harassment he was facing, that makes it even more spine chilling. So I mean, he was so methodical in documenting everything, explaining his own torture and harassment, which led him to take this kind of extreme step. So I won't get into these legal aspects, but on the face of it, it appears that he's been an unfortunate victim who vainly fought against a system, against an entire system that was loaded against him and married men like him. So that's as much as we can get. There are several expert lawyers who have given their take on various YouTube channels as well. So people who are interested in exploring that can tune into those channels. But most fundamental aspect of this whole tragedy, Atul Subash is a symbol. He's symbolic. He epitomizes something, a very deep rot that roughly began about 70 years ago. Just to give a perspective of the levels at which this operates, I'll ask a very simple question to all our viewers. Is this the same country? Is this the same Bharatavarsha that celebrates Savitri as the ideal wife who saved her dead husband by having a long conversation with Yama, the god of death himself, and then managed to revive his life, take his life back from death. Is this the same country in which this has happened? This and, innumerable such cases which have unfortunately not come to light. Is this the same country that celebrates Savitri? In fact, in many of our shastras, in many of our sacred texts, it is said that getting a good wife is a boon from the Devatas.
True.
I don't think, anybody could have said this better. And, these texts date back minimum to what? 2000 years. So is this the same country in which this has happened? Okay, now let's piece it, deconstruct it step by step. Let's begin with wedding. Or more specifically, let's look at the way our weddings have transformed in front of our own eyes, especially over the last 25 or 30 years. Our weddings have transformed from sanctity to perversity. Our weddings have transformed from being an extremely sacred ceremony to drunken and debauched parties. I've been to several of these alleged weddings. All right. And it also happens, it doesn't happen, several offshoots of this kind of debasing and degeneracy of a wedding is that the more money you have, the more perverse these alleged weddings get. And of late, some celebrity weddings have become sponsored events. Two classic examples in the recent month have caught my attention. The first is that, who's that lady, that Tamil superstar, alleged superstar, Nayanthara. Her wedding was sponsored in retrospect by a company called Netflix, which bought the OTT rights for her entire wedding event for something like 50 crores. And even more recently, another, neighboring star, I wouldn't call him a star, but a celebrity Telugu film actor, Nagarjuna's son, Naga Chaitanya. This was his second marriage. Okay, and you are given all kinds of disgusting details, including the 70 lakh rupee watch that he wore on his wedding, and the bride's expensive Kanchipuram sari, which was allegedly embroidered with real gold. This kind of vulgar display of wealth. And that marriage video was again sold to Netflix for 50 crores. Are these weddings, or what are they? By what standard, by what definition of the word can you call these as weddings? And therefore it is small wonder that all such weddings do not last long. There is a direct correlation, Parag. And these weddings have become like consumables or processed foods which come with an expiry date.
Well said.
As simple as that. And why I am giving all this background is to show the levels at which the whole society, especially the Hindu society, has disintegrated and, broken almost into pieces. This is a very, very alarming kind of development. And all of these things are invisibly linked. You can't see the threads. But all it takes is to cut one thread and the whole thing comes apart. Which is exactly what is happening out here. There is a beautiful Sanskrit aphorism which basically says, Yadbhavam tadbhavati, meaning things reveal themselves to us depending on our bhava or emotion or feeling or attitude. For example, why could a humble potter named Gora, who lived in Maharashtra, why could this humble potter Gora, why was he able to see Sri Krishna in the clay that he used for making pots, in the very pots that, earned him a livelihood? He saw Krishna there. And in turn, his bhakti was so amazing that he cut off his hands. And Krishna came down in the form of a potter and served him and gave darshan to Gora in Pandrapur. Yadbhavam tadbhavati. What do these fellows see in weddings? How are they treating, such sacred ceremonies? And, this degeneracy gets even worse. How many couples, for example, on an average, how many Hindu couples actually pay attention to the meaning of the wedding mantras? How many even, take the time and the effort and have the humility and the basic decency to ask the Purohit, what is the meaning of these mantras that, you're chanting? From experience, I'm telling you, if a wedding couple asks any Purohit the meaning of these mantras, he will be more than happy to tell them to you. But to you, it is a meaningless ritual that has to be,
to be done over with.
To be done and, gotten over with. How many of them have this kind of humility and this, cultural rootedness to even the basic decency that this is the most important event of your life. And you better have that kind of reverence for it. Nahi karenge. So, and thanks to this kind of, colossal negligence, which Purohita will bless the couple from his heart? It is a charade. These things count for a lot, Parag. It is a charade, it is a party, it is not a wedding. It is an event.
It is an event, yeah.
Which will be sponsored. You can sell your rights away to, the highest bidder. And, what the hell is all this about candid photo shoots, man? Why? Why do you need this? And like I said, how long will these weddings last? There's one very disgusting candid photo. I mean, it's getting vulgar and vulgar.
Yes, ball by ball commentary, pregnancy step by step, everything is in the public domain now.
Exactly.
There is no sanctity of...
Nothing at all. Yeah. You are doing in a public field, in a resort, all these so-called candid photo shoot. Yeah, they are candid. Stopping short of shooting your wedding night video. They're doing everything in that name. What should be done in the bedroom? You're getting it shot. You're doing it in the open and getting it shot and plastering it all over the bloody social media outlets. For what joy? And why would these marriages last? Once the fun of all this candid nonsense is gone, what do you have? Nothing at all. So why would these marriages last? And like I said, now back onto the Atul case. I have no words actually, I'm tongue tied. Right? I mean, it's very hard for me to even do this episode. That image is stuck in my mind. That video and the way he's actually describing the process before he commits suicide. So just imagine, place yourself in that poor guy's shoes, man. 80 minutes of pure agony narrated with a straight face. But there, what really caught my attention was one thing he said, that, I'm suffering all this harassment only because of the money that I'm earning. It's purely extortion, nothing else.
Yes.
Extortion, nothing else. Okay. And it's because of the money that I earn, and it is the same money which I pay as taxes, and that same money is being used to fund my harassers.
So poignant.
And these harassers have the legal backing that supports my harassment.
Section 498A.
498A. So it is an extremely draconian act. I mean, it's quite obvious by now. I don't know why it is there. And, the evils and the kind of victims that this legislation has claimed over the last 32 years, that's well known. But that law is only a deeper manifestation of a cancer. Like I said, these things, cases like this Atul suicide and, several of the, what do you mean there are several organizations across India fighting for the protection of men against their own wives? What do you mean?
Yes. The level of degeneration.
These organizations have been single-handedly created by a legislation, nothing less, passed in the Parliament of India, right? Let's not get into the merits and demerits of this legislation, but like I said, as always, we need to tackle the roots of any issue. This is a cancer. What we are seeing there is a cancer, but the cancerous cells, the roots are elsewhere. Okay, and I'll get to that. But in the specific case of this 498A, taking from, borrowing an analogy from our epics, it can be called, this so-called law, section 498A, it can be called the revenge of Shurpanakha.
Okay, can you just elaborate?
This law is akin to the revenge of Shurpanakha in our own times. So, Shurpanakha is a demoness, all of us know in Ramayana. She is besotted with Sri Ramachandra, who is married, happily married. So, she has no compunctions. She has an extreme lust for Rama, and you should read very, very explicit lines about, the filthy, vulgar conversation that she has. How she proposes to Rama. Extremely, vulgar terms she uses. And then Rama spurns her advances and he said, this is not done. I'm happy with my wife, so please, jao, aap jao. So, theek hai, but she is not dissuaded. So she looks at Lakshmana. And she said, agar Ram nahi mila to Lakshman sahi. So then, when good words, when decent methods don't work. So, her nose is cut off by Lakshmana. It's as simple as that, no? So how long can you, reason and be decent with such people with this kind of, third-rated intent? All right.
Absolutely.
And so he cuts off her nose. And as revenge, all of us know that she goes and complains to her elder brother, Ravana. And then, we all know what happens next. So such laws are drafted by a bunch of bitter psychotic Shurpanakas of our own time. These bitter women see the entire mankind in the literal sense. They see men as their enemies to be subject to lifelong suffering.
You bring up a very, very valid point.
Yeah.
I think while the intent of the legislation may have been whatever, and again,
the road to hell is paved with good intentions, Parag.
Okay, there you I think nullified here itself.
As simple as it.
What I was going to say was that this whole notion that men are aggressors.
All men are evil by default.
Yeah, men are aggressors. Women are the victims.
Yeah.
And women are the victims.
Yeah. No. Men are perpetual aggressors. Women are perpetual victims.
Yes.
You can't go wrong with this kind of a logic.
And that precisely is what has been challenged in the most ugly manner by this gory suicide of Atul Subash.
Absolutely.
I think it is absolutely a burning issue.
Yeah. So you can't have such universal equations. All men are brutal oppressors and all women are by default victims. This is the same. This is a social equivalent of this Marxist perversion, which basically says that all rich people are evil. And all poor people are by default oppressed and noble.
Yeah, it's actually similar.
Same
Oppressors
thing.
oppressed,
So
aggressor victim.
So this is the economic equation. This is the social equation.
Absolutely.
So such laws were drafted by this bunch of psychotic, bitter women who perhaps went through bad experiences with some of the men in their lives. And they are taking revenge against all men throughout the world, in all societies. This is as simple as that. But remember that the same Srimad Ramayana, what does it tell us in the end? It tells us that it was Sita Mata who won in the end. No matter all the kidnapping, no matter all the mental torture, all that Ashok Vatika, no matter all the suffering, her own husband came and rescued. What does it tell you about the refined sense of ethics and morals of that Hindu society, in which an entire army of monkeys saw morality and justice in Sri Rama's cause?
And that's why they joined hands.
They had everything to lose. They lost their lives in the war against Ravana.
And yet they joined.
And yet they joined.
Where the cause is so noble.
Exactly. So it is a very lofty principle. It's a very profound, treatise on ethics, narrated in the form of a great epic. This epic is precisely what built our society and our culture and our civilization. So Sita wins in the end. And what happens to Shurpanaka? Of course, she not only died, but she also did something else. Her lust for Rama and then Lakshmana, it ended up killing of thousands of innocent citizens of Sri Lanka who died for no fault of theirs.
For one moment's
lust.
Yes.
Okay. And she was also directly responsible for the death of both her elder brothers, Ravana and Kumbhakarna. Right? And now, take this immortal story and look around you. What do you see, Parag? In much the same way, ever since this draconian legislation was enacted, in much the same way as the citizens of Sri Lanka died, thousands and thousands of people like Atul Subash are being killed either silently through suffering or taking extreme steps like committing suicide, like what this unfortunate man. Sir, Ramayana and Mahabharata are eternally relevant and
timeless,
universally
timeless
valid.
Wisdom perpetuates.
Universally valid. Apart from, leading to this kind of avoidable loss of lives of men, victims of 498A. Apart from that, all such short-sighted, hastily thought out laws like 498A, what all such laws do is that they create a parallel economy which is fueled and run by and sustained by corruption. Who are the people who gain the maximum out of such cases? It is the cops, the lawyers, and the judges.
And in this case, he
has actually named the judge.
They demanded 5 lakhs for settling the case.
Settling the case. So who stands to benefit?
Yeah, actually, right. It spawns an entire ecosystem.
Yeah.
Like I said, he refused to fund the people who were harassing him.
Exactly.
It's quite a telling comment that he has made, unfortunately.
So this is a thriving economy which was created out of thin air.
Had this law not been there,
exactly,
this entire economy would not have spawned.
There are ways to redress serious problems.
Yeah, I think it's a
this is not the way to do this.
Very nice new perspective on this.
Absolutely. 498A, all such draconian law. Those are, the advanced stages of cancer, if I might use that kind of medical terminology. They are. You see this cancer, the eruption of cancer all over us. So it's always a nice thing to go back and trace the roots. How, from where, when this cancer erupted. All right. So in this specific case, laws like Section 498A, they are the evil and one of the most vicious offshoots of something called the Hindu Code Bill. So the Hindu Code Bill collectively was a series of legislations that were envisaged in the 1950s to ostensibly reform the Hindu society, as if no other society in secular India needed reform. All right. So, and the most or rather the worst bill that became law was something called the Hindu Marriage Act. Okay, the source of much of the disintegration and the breakup of the Hindu society by breaking up the family step by step lies in this Hindu Marriage Act of 1955. So there was a great legal scholar named Dr. Sarkar. He has written a wonderful book very scholarly book analyzing all such legislations. That book was published in 1958. And I'll read out a couple of excerpts from that book. When these Hindu code bills were being furiously debated in parliament, in public discourse and elsewhere, this is what he says, and I quote him. There is no demand for the codification of Hindu law by the Hindu public. Fundamental point. All right. You are doing something for which there was no need, only because you had political power. So let me repeat that. There is no demand for the codification of Hindu law by the Hindu public. This is so as most of the rules of Hindu law are now well established and easily understandable. Had there been any necessity, it would have expressed through public opinion. As simple as that. Okay? Hindu law, divorced from the Smritis and the Nibandhas, would be a contradiction in terms. The spirit of the Hindu Code Bill seems to be against everything Hindu. The attempt of the code seems to change the culture and civilization of the Hindus by legislation, which is an absurdity in itself. The code contemplates secularization of everything which has been inextricably connected with the Hindu religion and culture, which is exactly what has happened. And this is beautiful. The advocates of the code were the peculiar products of Western civilization and Western education. They did not understand the underlying spirit or genius of the Hindu culture and religion. They were always attracted more by the exterior rather than the intrinsic worth. Those who were really benefited by Western contact were never unwise enough to denounce their own cultural achievements and contributions. As a matter of fact, without religion, philosophy and culture, what is Hinduism and what is its contribution thereof?
Beautiful. And if a 6,000-year-old civilization was held together without these laws in the Code Bill, clearly, beautiful this gentleman's observation.
The piece of contemplated legislation is sure to lead to more chaos and confusion and lack of social discipline and order.
Exactly the manifestation.
Exactly what has happened, no?
Thank you for bringing this to light.
As simple as that.
Mr. Sarkar, you read right?
Yeah, Mr. Sarkar, which is exactly what has happened today. The Hindu society is a mess. It's a mass of chaos, confusion, unruliness, social disorder and breakdown and disintegration. Like I said, you always have to get into the roots of these things. Hindu society today resembles, the proverbial broken mirror. It is shattered into pieces, and even God cannot come and put those pieces together. Utna hi hai. Which once again, in all such cases, it brings us back to the same fundamental question. What was the character, caliber and compassion? What was the mettle of the kind of Hindus who drafted these laws like Hindu Marriage Act? The answer is supplied by none other than the iconic DVG or DV Gundappa. Back then it is very easy for us. How quickly, there has to be, the Hindu society should be given something like, infinite number of Nobel Prizes for its civilizational and cultural amnesia. Because
for a minute I thought you were complimenting. Yeah.
Few of us today remember the kind of outrage that erupted when these Hindu code bills were mooted. That story, no media tells you, no journal will tell you. But even now, in retrospect, if those debates and all that outrage, the story of that period was told, the damage, it's too late. The damage has been extensive and irreparable. So when these series of this Hindu code bills were being hotly debated, this is what Mr. DVG wrote, and I quote from him. The misfortune of Hindu society today is that the power to affect its law and life has fallen into the hands of persons whose Hinduism is to be found only in the official entries of personal particulars in public documents like census records. So this was a kind of, look, all these legislations which cut at the very roots of our family and our social order were drafted by people with Hindu names.
Which is the tragedy.
Which is a tragedy.
Awards for cultural
We have an unlimited and an extraordinary capacity for committing civilization and suicide. And this is what DVG continues. Their knowledge of the Hindu scriptures is of the hearsay kind, and their faith in the teaching of Sanatana Dharma is less than skin deep. They feel apologetic about practices and beliefs which the Western world is unable to endorse. Parag, like I keep saying, what has changed? Not that such Hindus prefer the Christian or the Muslim or any other religion to Hinduism. As such, they find all religions sniffed at by their inner nature as so much gibberish. The Hindu atheist, and these are my words, the Hindu atheist has caused perhaps more damage than all the missionaries put together.
Telling.
Okay.
Extremely telling.
Continue. The good to such Hindus is that which is good to eat. The true is that which is true to the hand grasp. They have no feel for any values less than gross. Their one passion is for what they regard as modernism, to make India a replica of America or Russia. What did I say? Yad bhavam tad bhavati. They think that India must adapt herself to world conditions and do not pause to consider whether India may not persuade the world to adopt her values and her ideals of social organization. In their zeal for modernism, they forget that the joint family is socialistic in spirit and working, and little do they care if it gets shattered by the overdevelopment of individualism instigated by a law full of encouragement to partition claims.
Overdevelopment of individualism.
This is a law.
Remarkable.
These laws, like DVG says, instigated by a law that encourages the breakup of families. What is the partition claim? Breakup of family.
Yes.
Continue. It is nothing to such Hindus that the certainty of equal share for the daughter in her father's property may possibly weaken her attachment and her loyalty to her husband's house, and may so lead to domestic and social complications. क्या हो रहा है सर? यही हो रहा है?
यही हो रहा है.
Remember, these laws were drafted about 70 years ago, and they have little patience for spiritual and filial service, meaning pitarrana, the rana that we have for ancestors and which is our duty to discharge. These reformers are so far out of touch with the norm of the living Hindu mind as to the ethos of the Dharma Shastras. Their eye is riveted on the conditions of living in urban localities and in the strata of society touched by English education and cash prosperity.
This is way back when?
This was written in 1955, I think. Continue. And they think little of and feel much less with the far vaster rural community and its environment. The outstanding fact about such Hindus is not that they're rationalistic and scientific as they consider themselves to be, but that they are latitudinarian and imitative. If they were really scientific, they would have appreciated the inapplicability of the objective methods of test and proof derived from the physical sciences to matters of faith like punya and the reincarnation of the soul, which are in the realm of spirituality and religion.
Oh, evocatively, sir.
You ask for physical proof and an equation or a principle of physics to prove that a profound philosophical value like discharging your debt, unseen debt to your pitras. And then you say that because it doesn't meet this test, this is a, pitrarna is a matter of superstition that can be discarded.
But the depth of this gentleman DVG way back then, profound.
If such Hindus were rational, they would see that a man's concern for his after death virtue is as natural as his love for progeny. Lacking the habit of self introspection, they have not come even under the salutary restraint of a doubt as to the sufficiency of their understanding and insight. In other words, they're arrogant, dismissive, haughty, and the source of all these vices comes from their ignorance and a complete lack of decency. Continue. Such Hindus are taking short views where the longest views are called for. They are valuing things of the surface about things of the deeper realms of man's being. Close quote. This has to be memorized.
It is worth memorizing.
This has to
the
be
entire
thing
all that
has
you
to
read
be-
out.
It has to be memorized. As a result, we have lost access as Hindus today. We have lost access to our own society as it existed about even 40 years ago. And then, on a closing note, a former union minister, that clip has gone viral ever since the late, great, unfortunate Atul Subash committed suicide. In that clip, you have this former union minister, a lady, who was once asked in an interview, in a TV interview, the anchor asks her that, don't you think the far-reaching consequences of this law
The 498A?
will be 498A will be disastrous and injurious to men? Won't men suffer as a result of this legislations? She said, let them suffer. And the name of this lady is Srimati Renuka Chaudhary, who was once compared to Shurpanaka on the floor of the parliament by none other than
Prime Minister Modi.
the Prime Minister Narendra Modi. This is the perspective I bring to the table.
So, as anticipated, Sandeep was able to bring in several dimensions from a cultural and a civilizational standpoint. The parallels from Ramayana and the level of degeneration in our society, he painted a grim picture of the civilizational self-destruct of the Hindu society in the last. And I think these insights that he embellished with the observations made way back in the 1950s from gentlemen like Sarkar and DVG himself, I think perhaps is a wake-up call for the entire Hindu society. And one can only wish that the wake-up call would not have come at such a high price with the grim, brutal torture that Atul Subash suffered, for which he had to take his own life in the manner that he did. So thank you, Sandeep, for bringing all this to light and tracing it back to the roots, like you said, in the entire episode, starting with the codification of Hindu laws in 1950. I think it is time for a revisit, and Sandeep brings in a lot of civilizational dimensions. I think those need to be paid attention to. So thank you all for joining, watching Dharma Podcast, and we look forward to you liking, subscribing and sharing Dharma Podcast, and so that the content and this particular development that Sandeep spoke about reaches a wider audience. Thank you so much.